The Marine Corps requires leaders of all ranks to have a deep understanding of war and the employment of force. MCDP 1 reminds Marines that the military profession is a thinking profession. Every Marine is expected to be a student of the art and science of war. It goes on to say that every Marine has an individual responsibility to study the profession of arms. Self-directed study in the art and science of war is at least equal in importance to maintaining physical condition and should receive at least equal time. The Marine Corps Association understands the critical importance of ensuring that Marines are as mentally ready for combat as they are physically ready. That is why we offer an entire page dedicated to wargaming on our website. We have recommendations for both tabletop board games as well as computer games. And for Marine Corps Association members, there is a discount code for war game design studios that you can find on the website. War games are a great way to immerse yourself in history and to put yourself in the shoes of the great leaders of history. Go beyond guided instruction and experience the thrill of wargaming. Check us out at mca-marines.org/decision-making-exercises/wargaming-2. That's mca-marines.org/decision-making-exercises/wargaming-2. Take your training to the next level. Hey, Scuttlebutt listeners. Welcome to episode 210. This week, we continue our Road to 250 segment, celebrating the Marine Corps' 250th birthday in 2025. Throughout this year, we've been featuring stories and history from throughout the 250 years of the Marine Corps. These episodes have been nested within the MCA's overall Road to 250 campaign, where you'll find featured articles in both the Gazette and Leatherneck, highlighting events and battles within specific periods in the Marine Corps' history. The MCA also has a commemorative Road to 250 coin collection. These commemorative challenge coins can only be found through the MCA. Go to marineshop.net to order individual coins or email customer service at mca-marines.org to order the entire set or learn more. This month, we walked the road to 250 with another Semper Cinema crossover. The team decided to watch Heartbreak Ridge. Luckily, the film is set around the 1983 invasion of Grenada, which happens to fit in the September's era of Marine Corps history, or else we might be accused of just using the podcast as an excuse to watch cheesy Marine Corps movies on the association's dime. And to add further legitimacy to this segment, we brought in our editor-in-chief, Colonel Chris Woodbridge, to the studio to talk about the movie, the invasion of Grenada, and what influences both have had on a generation of Marines coming up in the 80s and 90s. This is episode 210.
Hello, Scuttlebutt listeners. I'm William. I'm here today with Vic.
Hey.
And Colonel Woodbridge.
Hey.
And we are going to do another episode of Semper Cinema, tackling one of the most iconic films relating to the Marine Corps, Heartbreak Ridge, a Clint Eastwood film that came out 1986. It was the script was originally written by a Vietnam veteran, James Carabastos, who approached Eastwood and was supposed to actually, as we're talking about before the film, be an Army-centric film. However, they saw the script, immediately said no.
It's weird.
And then went straight to the Marine Corps, who for some reason immediately said yes. And they
It's like 29 Palms. You guys don't want this, basically? We'll take it.
And they had the full endorsement of the film until they saw the rough cut, in which case they wanted nothing to do with it. This was an Eastwood directed film, as mentioned previously, and you can definitely see that it has hints of a lot of what the era was going through at the time, which we'll talk about in this documentary. And it's almost like the Marine Corps version of Top Gun. Am I not wrong? To some extent,
they certainly came out around the same time. Different storylines appealing to a different audience. Top Gun, big name, Tom Cruise, full endorsement of the Navy. Obviously, Navy pilots doing the actual flying of 14 Tomcats, the actual staff of Fighter Weapons School, to include, then I believe he was a commander, Rat Willard, later 4-star Admiral Rat Willard, flew most of the filmed missions. So that appeals at one level. Heartbreak Ridge is a classic B movie. It really is, and I don't think that's disparaging or insulting to Clint Eastwood or anybody else. I mean, they set out to make what they made, which was a very tongue-in-cheek, but also sort of an honorific tribute to the Marine Corps. And the one thing I will say about it, at the time, we're talking mid-1980s. President Reagan was going into his second term at this point, and these movies and several others at that time were in what I'll put the genre of, America is back. We're proud to be an American again. This was after the experience of Vietnam, the drawdown after Vietnam, the late 1970s. Some disgraces to the country as hostages are taken in Tehran, and other sort of black eyes in our domestic and foreign policy. And movies reflected that at the time. You had Coming Home. You had other Vietnam War movies that really just sustained a very, very negative view of Vietnam veterans. Were very critical and disparaging of the war effort at that time, and really played up to public, sort of sympathies. That changed. That changed in 1980, and it only got better. And yeah, some movies were a little cartoony, more cartoony than others. And certainly after you've had a little bit of experience in the Marine Corps, you start to realize just how cartoony Heartbreak Ridge actually was.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's an interesting point, because I didn't realize how long it had been since I saw it. And I realized watching it again that I hadn't seen it since I joined the Marine Corps. And so as a young man watching it, I thought it was, quintessential Marine Corps stuff. And now, having worn the uniform, I'm like, what the fuck? But I do want to say really quick, though, as we're leading into this, is one of the things I think is fascinating, and why we picked this movie to do for our Road to 250 series, and to do a Semper Cinema for this bucket in our look back in the 250 years of the Marine Corps, is that this sort of campy, very overly stereotypical, super patriotic, manly Marine Corps is nested within a very real thing in the invasion of Grenada and Operation Urgent Fury. So I thought that was really fascinating that you have 80% of the movie that, and we'll discuss the accuracy and all the thing, but then all of a sudden you have a very real thing that happened. And I felt like, anyways, what was the impetus behind there? What was the production? What was the Marine Corps' involvement there? But so that's what we're going to be doing today, is not only doing a sort of fun, movie review here in Semper Cinema, but also to talk about the very real thing of Urgent Fury, Operation Urgent Fury, in the invasion of Grenada. So.
All right. So let's kick it off as we usually do. So we're going to go starting with Colonel Woodbridge. Rank the film, like an Amazon review, 1 to 5 stars, and explain your rating.
As a film, I'd give it 2.5 stars, but as part of Marine Corps popular culture, it's got to be a 5.
Nice.
And truly, it is a B movie. It's full of tropes and stereotypes from individual characters. The hard ass, multi-war staff NCO heading into retirement. The geeky nerd lieutenant with his military history club and
dropping his clipboard all the time,
and birth control glasses, dropping his clipboard. Self-serving major played by played by Everett McGill, another, again, a Hollywood and TV, staple actor.
yeah.
And you look at the cast of the movie, so many folks in there are just consummate pros of the industry from those days. But, so to your point, 1983 was when I signed my first contract in the Marine Corps. So I'm, at that point, heading into my freshman year of college, and Grenada happens, and it's all over the news. And that was the largest U.S. military operation since the end of the Vietnam War, since 1975, and it really caught people by surprise. It really was successful enough that most people, just the average viewers, just saw it as this patriotic milestone of, here, this is the way the U.S. should be acting. We're going to go protect people. We're going to fight communism. We're going to keep aggression from happening on our front doorstep in the Caribbean. We're going to oppose the evil empire of the Soviet Union and their proxies, the Cubans. It was almost scripted in the news. Now, as historians, as you start digging deeper into that, it doesn't bear up to quite as much scrutiny. The fact of the matter is, Urgent Fury as an operation, as a joint operation, is probably one of the two main reasons that we would see the Goldwater-Nichols Defense Department Reorganization Act, because of the demonstrated inability of the service departments to work together and coordinate on the ground. And as simple as radios that will not work with each other, security encryption on radios that are incompatible, so that 75th Ranger Regiment, Army 82nd Airborne Division soldiers are physically incapable from communicating with Navy and Marine aircraft, Marines on the ground, and all of them, and this became a vignette in the movie, all of them incapable of talking to higher headquarters and having to try to use commercial payphones.
Call back to Camp Lejeune.
Well, call back to Camp Lejeune, and the lieutenant, you're going to use my credit card. And that's based on an actual incident that occurred with the 82nd troops on the ground. They had no other way to communicate but to call commercially back to Fayetteville to try and coordinate surface fire support by calling on the phone back to Fayetteville. So not the way to do things, guys. And that was very well recognized at the time and led to congressional action that, created the joint force that we operate in today successfully. But, at the time it was, and I'll also say it's one of those two signature events of certainly that period in my life, in my time in the Marine Corps, and I think in the history of the Corps, because what else happened at that same period in time was the Beirut barracks. And so that, in those two events, you demonstrated America exercising its national will and the jeopardy that our Marines or servicemen are put in when they are out doing that. And so, it made on that level. It was very much a signature event of the time. And then 3 years later, the movie comes out, and by that point, I had been through all of officer candidate school and was getting ready to get commissioned, and the movie, we watched it so many times, and at the basic school and whatnot, you almost guys start reciting lines from the movie, of course. Well, interestingly, a tagline that the Marine Corps prides itself on to this day came out of that movie, nowhere else. Improvise, adapt, overcome. We put that on T-shirts and tattoos and bumper stickers. That's not from any Marine Corps doctrinal publication or manual or some order or directive. That's from the script Gunnery Sergeant Thomas Highway talking to his recon platoon in Heartbreak Ridge. And then after you've been around the Corps a little, I was very fortunate as lieutenant. My first posting was to Camp Pendleton, God's country on the coast of Southern California. And not long after you get there, you start to, or talk to any Marine who had been stationed there, and you realize that's where they filmed the movie. The movie was filmed at Camp Talega, where Force Recon was, up on the north end of Camp Pendleton, right outside of San Clemente, one of the beautiful Orange County beach cities, just up north from Trestle, some of the best surf you could have out there. But the funny part is, who did Operation Urgent Fury? Tutu Mew out of Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. And Camp Lejeune does not look anything like Camp Pendleton. Not at all. Camp Pendleton is, chaparral, sagebrush, and mountains.
Yeah.
Camp Lejeune is pine trees and swamp and flat.
Well, my wife's an LA kid, and even she, watching the movie's like, isn't that California?
Oh yeah, and
like,
so many landmarks too.
Cute. Well, yeah, the White House from
the White House, the division headquarters down at Mainside. The area, the training area around Talega had tank trails, and that's where the obstacles are. The
Kwanzaa huts over at Horno.
Oh, yep.
Yeah.
And
I guess I missed that part of the script. I just assumed it was California. I wasn't actually paying attention.
No, yeah, exactly. When I was growing up, that's what I thought it was supposed to be. Camp Pendleton Marines. Yeah. No.
Well, and then other than it being recon, they never specify what unit it is.
Right.
They're very, very careful about
an elite unit. That's
yes,
all they
an
say.
elite fighting force. But it's and the other thing that we again, all the tropes, all the stereotypes, but some stereotypes are based in a little more reality. And you recall you've got the recon platoon, and of course there's PFC Aponte and PFC Quiñones, and 1st Marine Division at the time. I mean, it was. Thank God for Southern California and NorCal and Arizona, Texas, but because that division is full of some of the toughest Cholo kids you ever find in the world, and they're just great Marines. But neither of these characters spoke any English, or at least they didn't let on that they did.
Want to, yeah.
And I ran into that as a platoon commander. All the time. And luckily, I spoke Spanish, so got wise to them real quick. But it's ironic that even some of the the scenery of other places. The movie starts off at the Swallows Inn in San Juan Capistrano, California. Old Orange County cowboy bar that I think might still be there.
It's still there, yeah. It is. I think years ago, my buddy had his wedding reception there.
But I mean, those were places where you, as Marines, you were welcome to a point, but so many Marines before you had acted up and just acted the fool in these places that they were always. That's who the bouncers were going to be looking at the whole damn time.
Well, I mean, basically from Mission Viejo down to like Cardiff by the Sea.
Yes.
If you've got a short haircut, even if you're not a Marine, they're giving you the fuzzy eyebrow.
That's exactly right. Because somebody had screwed it up in the past. And the closer in you get, again, what is now North Coast Highway, and used to be Hill Street in Oceanside.
Oh, shit.
That was, you were one of many Marines who'd acted the fool in those areas.
Well, Vic, what's your Amazon review and rating?
So I guess I'll give it. I'll give 3 versions, and I'll explain why. So as from a viewing standpoint, it's just hilarious. So I could probably give 4.5, just from a sort of a novice want to watch a fun war movie. As a Marine. Probably about 3 stars is same because of all of what we've already identified as some of the inaccuracies. But then as an Amtracker, fucking 6 stars because they do that they landing with the M88 electronic drive, and they got the full the smoke Jenny going. So from that, I was just very very excited about that part.
as the non-Marine in the room, I give it 2.5 to 3 in the sense where it's from the historic perspective as well. It's not the type of war movie I like. No, but it is endearing.
It's like the Bad News Bears meets the Marine Corps.
It's crazy how Eastwood did this, and then he would go on later to do like Sands of Iwo Jima.
Right.
And the thing is, also culturally speaking, I grew up in the 90s and 2000s. 80s culture is something as a whole I've been hard to get into. Like 80s rock, 80s music, 80s country, 80s films, 80s like style and culture is just something I've never really been a huge fan of, and only recently really been starting to get into.
Yeah.
I'm now a huge Ozzy fan, so like I'm slowly starting to get into it. So it's that part of culture I just don't have an appreciation for, is probably the way I would phrase it. But,
well, you hadn't been born yet.
Exactly. Well, the thing is, I love the 60s culture. I love 70s culture, music, film. I love 40s, 50s. The 80s has just been this weird.
It gets weird. It gets very weird.
Yeah,
I mean,
it
piano
was.
key neckties, for
Yeah,
example.
it was.
It was a weird.
It was a strange period of time. It was mall culture.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So think about that.
Yeah.
That is completely or virtually
Yeah.
gone from our society.
The perm. You don't really see people wearing perms anymore.
Cases of Final Net for high school girls.
And I have to admit, like when I watch films, I mean, I have a sick of them. I love like historical period, hardcore. Sometimes it's hard for me to unplug. And you know what? I just did that. I'm just like, I don't need to have the most realistic depiction of the Marine Corps or the invasion of Grenada. I can just enjoy this barrage of genuine just entertainment. So I let myself do it. And
It is a barrage,
That's
indeed.
why it's a 2.5 3-star rating.
Nice.
So let's talk about a little bit about we've been touching about the 80s. What was the era in which this film was made, and who was it made for? And you touched on it a little bit earlier. This is
why don't I start this one,
Yeah.
and we'll go around, because I'm going to have a lot less significant or insightful. But so having when I saw the movie, I had to have been probably, it was definitely 6th grade. I was living in San Clemente. They had obviously wrapped filming and everything was done, a few years prior to, but I mean, many of those locations, people that I knew were in there and seeing. So like folks had met Clint Eastwood, where they filmed a lot of the bar scenes, were at a place called the Wagon Wheel Saloon, which was literally down the street from the Boys and Girls Club that I used to go to during summer breaks. Obviously all the Camp Pendleton stuff, many of the scenes where they're running their PTing was down the hill from where I used to play Little League baseball. Like there's our baseball field, the parking lot, a chain link fence, and then you look over and those were the training areas and the transit areas. So much of that was just part of the tapestry of my life at the time. But as far as like the geopolitical landscape, I had no idea. All I really knew was Marines are complete douchebags on the beach. They steal your waves. They don't know how to surf, but they always get in the way. They will fight you on at the drop of a hat. And the cussing was hilarious, for a 6th grader. All of that was just so. I don't have a lot other than to say that it really did, though, capture that sort of zeitgeist of like, America is awesome because if you don't like us, we're going to kick you in the nuts. Sir.
I'm just impressed that you use zeitgeist properly. So. But no, you're spot on, and it was, the spirit of the times. It was the zeitgeist of the beginning in 1980, sort of this return of. And nowadays, there's all sorts of other words with other baggage for this. American exceptionalism, national pride. Well, it was a return of American national pride. We had just come out of the period post-Vietnam of, this sort of weepy national angst, not even good 60s hippie music, just sort of, whiny 70s country rock.
I love that.
No. And so what changed was, we said, no, we're a powerful country. We're gonna work to defeat our opponents because there is evil in the world. And people got proud about that. And what's interesting is popular culture at the time, particularly movies, you had some very serious war movies. Heartbreak Ridge is, as we've well identified, not a serious war movie at all, or really even that serious a movie. It's a good movie. It's entertaining. And it's that, kind of popular culture trope of Marine Corps stereotypes. But this was the same period of time when you had Apocalypse Now, when you had Platoon, which were intended to be serious war movies. What I find interesting is I think you could talk to the filmmakers and directors, and they would agree. They would say, yes, serious war movie and serious anti-war movie. But that's not what audiences took away from it at the time. What audiences took away from Apocalypse Now is I love the smell of napalm in the morning and Ride of the Valkyrie in First Generation Huey's coming across the beach. Robert Duvall on the beach. Charlie Doesn't Surf. That's what people took away from that movie. In Platoon, it was
Willem Dafoe in the Jesus pose.
Yes, but it was also Tom Berenger as the platoon sergeant. Again, this beating the hell out of the lieutenant for having a screwed up fire mission and dropping mortar rounds on his own platoon. What people got motivated by, I believe, is not what the filmmakers, directors, and most of the actors probably intended in those films. They wanted it to be this, hyper-realistic, emotional look at the horror of war, sort of screed against, or when in reality, what in a lot of us, especially younger guys of the time, and guys who were looking at military service, took away was that's motivating as hell. That's tough, that's hard, but that's worth it to do for the country. It's, there's a little bit of that in Heartbreak Ridge, but it's not the same. Certainly not the same. Although, Clint Eastwood is iconic as that character. And I think that at the time, and again, going through officer candidates, there were a small subset of staff NCOs who tried to mimic him in some ways without being obvious about it. A lot didn't need to. They were their own brand of badass and crazy, but there were some, and again, because an awful lot of the Marine Corps at that time lacked combat experience. Really, there were a lot of still Vietnam veterans around at more senior levels.
Right.
So those more junior NCOs and staff NCOs needed somebody to emulate, and in some cases they'd emulate elements of this Hollywood character, this sort of completely made up gunnery sergeant. But it's not the first time we've seen characters like that. Sergeant Stryker, Sands of Iwo Jima. John Wayne, as the sergeant major who gets busted down to sergeant and becomes a squad leader. During World War II. Why? Drinking. And so again, this sort of a popular culture, again, sadly, largely based on some realities of just the kind of systemic behavioral issues of Marines.
Well, back we called it shell shock, right? And then we wonder why everybody's drunk all the time.
Exactly, and also just the again, that hard drinking, hard fighting, manly sort of, or what would we call it today? Toxic masculinity, some other, fictitious.
I don't like how you pointed at me
21st
when you brought that up.
fictitious, 21st century terminology, because I am from the 1900s, as my nieces and my nephew remind me. This is pure 1900s here.
Well, so let's talk. A little bit about the era that this film was written in and produced in and directed in order to understand, why it sort of remained, because it's during the Reagan era, which is almost like a cultural conservative counter movement to what had been going on during the 60s and 70s. And so
in response to the Soviet Union,
Yes.
seems to be
Yes.
growing.
The words of the time were the silent majority.
Exactly. So you have this idea though of you have these young fit Marines who they're all jacked.
Oh yeah.
They're all ripped, and they generally are proud that they are Marines. And so you have this Eastwood figure. He's like, let's not forget about the strengths and the positivity of the 40s, because he's a Korean War veteran.
Yes.
He's a Vietnam War veteran. So he's bringing a lot of these old cultural, what some would say, conservative values are to this next generation of Marines who are young, they're hip, they're rock stars, and you get the cultural, combatants that you see them, because he calls one of them a hippie. He's like, hippies.
Is it hippies anymore?
Yep.
So
What have you been doing? Listening to hippie music, bad mouthing your country, and so yes, absolutely, he's bringing this kind of old school, pre Summer of Love, pre Woodstock, pre hippie, anti-war. Pre-anti-war movement sensibility to young men of the 1980s.
It's almost saying like
young men of the 1980s.
The kids are all right, but they need a little bit of guidance, and
Yeah.
that's what Eastwood is trying to provide with this film. So let's shift the discussion then a little bit toward y'all were both Marines. What did this film get right and wrong about the Marine Corps?
And again, I'll start, because it is so much of a cartoon. It gets a lot right. It just overdoes things.
Yeah.
Like any cartoon, you create humor by exaggeration and that sort of thing. And so there's a lot of that. So yeah, are there geeky lieutenants who are history majors? Yeah, but they're also fit as hell and decent leaders and willing to learn from the staff NCOs who've been doing the job for 10, 15, 20 years. Yeah. Are all your junior Marines looking to run a sham and get over on somebody and, try to get out of doing this? And sure, yeah, there are a lot of Marines like that who are malingering, parts of the E3 mafia, but there are also Marines who, when push comes to shove, do know how to obey orders, do know how to use their initiative more often than not. And like any organization, we've got our top and bottom 10%ers, and we'll deal with people accordingly. Yeah. But you learn that, and you don't really see any of that reality in the movie.
It's more of a balance of extremes, because on one hand you have the Gunny Highway, and then you have Webster on the other end, and so this absolute lick spittle. You've got the major, and again, like you're saying, as a retired major, there are shitbag field grade officers for sure.
Yes. But they're not all that way.
But they're not all,
and not all logisticians are that way.
And they're not all self-serving.
Yes.
And
interestingly enough, especially at that time, most logisticians would never want to come over to the infantry.
Yeah.
It was quite the other way around, more often than not.
And not all sergeants major are,
Yes.
gonna love the disobedient, surly, drunk Gunny, even if they serve together. Because a lot of times it's like, yeah, we did serve together. Straighten the fuck up because you're constantly in my office.
Exactly, and I can't help you.
Yeah, I can't help you anymore. I outrank you by a lot.
And
even if you are a Medal of Honor.
the reality is, the time comes when it's you and me, buddy, until it's you or me, buddy. And no, you can't keep pulling somebody like that.
Yeah.
And that's a reality too. And I've actually experienced exactly that halo effect go on among veterans of multiple wars,
Sure.
Vietnam up through the present. Just because he was there with me, I'm going to take care of him and he's okay. And no matter what he does, well, no matter what he does. So, but yeah, it's,
Well, one question I have for you as far as the accuracy portion of it, because I think we've talked, a lot about even the location of it not being 100% accurate. But one question I do have for you, sir, that I don't know the answer to this, because in my time, recon was always seen as the guys who are hard as woodpecker lips. In this movie, they portray recon as like these bad news bears, and they're the stepchildren that you just, hey, we've got to do a force on force. Throw recon out there, give them a grid, and we'll go blow them up. Was it like that? I mean, recon, yeah, right. I mean, it wouldn't be your recon bubbas that would be these whipping boys.
No, honestly.
Even if they do not always have regulation haircuts, maybe they are a little looser.
Remember, always important to look cool.
Right.
Always important to look cool. Good haircut, Oakley sunglasses, UDT shorts.
You've got to be ready for that moment.
Exactly. Tan, rested, and ready. But no, the reputation at the time, and this at the time there were, there was Division Recon or Reconnaissance Battalion, and then there was Force Reconnaissance Companies. They were the hardest of the hard, best of the best, and highest trained, not just in terms of unit training, but the schools that they were sent to. Basic Reconnaissance Course, Amphibious Reconnaissance Course, Combatant Diver Course, Jump School, Ranger School, all of those training programs, most of which are outside the Marine Corps, those were the Marines you sent. Why? For the same reason you put them, or they tried to become and moved into the reconnaissance community, because they were guaranteed performers. All right, you're not going to gas out on a run. You're not going to not be able to do something physically. You're a guaranteed performer, and so you're a good investment to send to a school that's predominantly physically demanding, but also requires, brain work as well. And so, by far, some of our best Marines at the time. It always struck me in the movie that what they called the recon platoon that Highway actually goes to, in all of its aspects, was a lot more like what we called casual platoons at the time. At the time, we had our bottom 10% of Marines, many of whom were facing either, a punitive discharge or administrative separation for, a variety of
sick, dumb, lazies, and crazies.
Yes, a variety of issues. So just like the Recon Marine, that's a guaranteed performer. These guys, are guaranteed not to perform. And so in economy of management, you just don't waste time on them. You put them in one unit and you treat it and call it a casual platoon or a casual company, meaning, here are the rumble strips, boys, all right? And they're pretty broad. We got to account for you twice a day. You're going to take a urinalysis, without notice. You will wear the uniform. You will get a haircut when you're told to, but we're not going to screw with you. Or in the movie, ain't no one to fuck with you. All right, so we're not going to do that with you, because we know you're just doing X amount of time before you get out of uniform. You're either getting discharged from just time in service and you're not going to re-enlist and you don't have a future in the Marine Corps, either because you've chosen not to have one or you just self-selected and won't perform. And so, maybe in a lot of units, we'd use the casual platoon to do area police. Yeah, we need you out there to rake the rocks, pick up cigarette butts in the parking lot, do that sort of thing. But hey, you know what? You're on working party 2 hours in the morning, have one more formation, the rest of the day is yours. Just stay out of trouble, be here on time. And so a very low pressure schedule and a very low capability unit. That's what that outfit reminded me of. I mean, you got everybody from Swede who just got out of the brig. Well, the reality of that is, if you just got out of the brig, you're pending punitive discharge at some point. You got profile, which is not a Marine Corps term. That's an Army term, but that's a guy who's constantly at sickbay with some. He's a malingerer. My hangnails are bad. I can't do this. And so, the guy who's getting out of everything physically, a sick bay commando, we call him. You've got Quinones and Aponte who can't speak English. So how much can they really do? So that's and then you got, Stitch, your Mario Van Peebles, who's more into his rock and roll career and is wearing an earring and breaking regs. So, okay, we're not going to get much out of you. Go ahead, but to think of that as a reconnaissance platoon, right, kind of crazy. I think, and I don't know this for a fact, but possibly because they filmed most of it up at Camp Talega, which was where Force Recon was at that time. Maybe that played into it a little bit because the signage and everything. Yeah. Plus they go out and use the rappelling tower and use the obstacle course and all that sort of stuff. But that one doesn't track. Much more like a casual platoon. And throughout the history of the Marine Corps, casual platoons have been casual companies or even battalions. During the early 1970s, post-Vietnam, and certainly after the first urinalysis, okay, there were entire formations of Marines who were getting discharged from the Marine Corps punitively because they were popping hot on urinalysis and things like that. So again, you're not going to get anything out of the Marine. Don't waste the time. Set those basic rumble strips and let them do their time and get them out as...
I was just thinking that the only thing about it is that the only way you validate having a guy like Highway is you put him, obviously, as a former force guy. You're not going to have him babysit the sick, dumb ladies. So, and then to see their maturation once they come on board to actually become this elite fighting force, you have to give them the moniker, but their starting point, I thought, was just way off. Like, you're not going to basically take Marsoc and make him a bunch of shit bags.
Well, they kind of write off being like the guy who was there beforehand ran up.
Yeah, he was road. Yeah.
Yes.
Let's start digging into the history of this a little bit, because I think we're in 2025 now, and looking back, it's kind of interesting how Gunnery Sergeant Highway was a Korean War vet, the Forgotten War, and then in Grenada has been largely forgotten in popular memory. There's not tons of films about it, not tons of documentary about it. Where I was looking at trying to get footage for a MCA documentary, and there's barely any. And so it's let's try to shed some light on this this period of time, because your average person doesn't know about the invasion. So Colonel Whitbridge, let's talk about
that. So the Operation Urgent Fury occurred because of internal politics on the island of Grenada. There was a communist-backed political movement that won a more or less legitimate election, but then proceeded to arrest and execute the former president of the country. And we had, we, the United States, had good information that Cuban construction workers who had been sent to help build port facilities and roads were in fact Cuban special forces who were helping this local leftist. It's hard to call them an insurgency because they were a political party, but they had come to power illegitimately in our assessment. And so combined with that, again, and at the time, fairly overt Soviet presence, not Russian, go back to the 80s, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, Soviet presence in Cuba at the time. And there was, in addition, a medical college, like there are in a lot of Caribbean countries, where you had international students, some of whom were American. And there was concern that they could be, remember, set this in perspective now, 1979, 1980. Okay, hostages are a real thing.
Right.
Okay, we had just had a couple hundred Americans released in 1980 when President Reagan was inaugurated that had been held in Tehran by the Iranian regime. Concern over getting more Americans put in that position. And so, all right, let's send a military force down to Grenada in order to counter this influence from Cuba, in order to ensure there is some legitimate transfer of power in the government, and to protect American citizens and third country nationals going to school there. And then, and so the force of choice at that time, again, we're talking the period of time in between the failed hostage rescue attempt in Tehran and Operation Eagle Claw, and then the Goldwater-Nichols Act. So we're in the middle of that time. We did not have a joint force. We did not have the concept of regional or geographic combatant commanders. We didn't have the idea of unified command. And so there was no overall commander for the forces in Grenada. You had Marines under the fleet. You had Army out of Fort Bragg. And you had Navy with the Marines, to include SEALs, to include U.S., what would become Joint Special Operations Command, U.S. SOCOM, Naval Special Warfare Troops out of Dam Neck. They're sent specifically to prevent the hostage situation. Marines are sent to secure the port, the airfield. Rangers and 82nd Airborne are sent to essentially contain the local communist and Cuban forces on the island. No one can talk to each other. No one can coordinate. No one can do those basic warfighting functions like calling for fire, sharing intelligence, position reporting. No maps available. Getting road maps. The Rand McNally out of the gas station.
Battle line,
Nope.
Battle space boundary coordination, none of that stuff.
And interestingly enough, virtually no international diplomatic effort. The great story is at the time you had Margaret Thatcher, the Iron Lady of the UK, didn't even get 24 hours notice from President Reagan that we, the United States, are about to do this. Why is that an issue? Because Grenada was part of the Commonwealth. It would only recently become independent from the UK. same kind of Caribbean territories as the British Virgin Islands, Jamaica, etc. So it was definitely part of the UK's international area of interest. No heads up. That was problematic. That left a mark at the time. And so again, no media, virtually no media on the ground. So no, not a lot of film footage, not a lot of reporting. And what did get reported, as I said, was, very indirect. Dan Rather kind of talking about it from someplace in, Florida or North Carolina. Nobody actually allowed on the island in terms of media. The story that came across was, as I described, earlier. Wow, we're really doing it. Here's America really flexing our muscles in the world like we know we should be. And in this case, we're doing it to protect American lives and to prevent communist expansion in the Caribbean. And so that fit into a much larger signature struggle of the period of the 1980s. Yes, it was very black and white at the time. The Soviet Union was the evil empire. Millions of people living under the yoke of international communism. Their economy being completely ruined by their system, no social freedoms, desire for those freedoms. Every time we had an Olympic Games, Soviet athletes defecting to the West, get us the hell out of there. So it was very clear that President Reagan, when he's told, called it the evil empire, joked about, sending the bombers over. We've decided to outlaw the Soviet Union, and Reagan had a great sense of humor. A little scary at times, but that was very much the zeitgeist of the time.
Well, yeah, and America was the light on the hill, right? So
We were the shining city on the hill.
Yeah, it's talking using biblical references and things
Yes,
to talk about.
and so much of that, and it was a very a conservative reaction, backlash to a lot of what had gone on in the 60s and 70s in some parts of the country, but it was more of this return to kind of traditional patriotism. That we are different, we are exceptional, we should be proud of that, and everybody wants to get on the team for the big win. And we also discovered our real power, which was our free market capitalist economy. I mean, ultimately, that's how we defeated the USSR, was by out-investing them, outspending them, because they could not generate the same kind of resources that we could. And they created their own bleeding ulcer by going into Afghanistan. And so that's a whole other show. We can talk about the relationships between Afghanistan, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and what would eventually result in Al-Qaeda and ISIS today. So
thanks for providing the context. So we're going to go ahead and wrap this up with my final question that I always like to ask when we do film reviews is, what is the film's argument? What is it trying to make? How does it do it? We'll hit with you first, Vic.
So this is interesting, and I didn't pick up on this until I was watching it again. But there's two themes that I thought weren't obvious when I was younger, and maybe fly a little bit in the face of what I think we were discussing as the intent of the movie to capture the zeitgeist is. You have this sort of entropy at the end, and all of these things happen in the last scene when they're doing their little parade. So you have this entropy at the end where Stitch Jones re-enlists and Gunny Highway is ramping down the hard as woodpecker lipsness of him. So you see a softer Gunny Highway and you see a harder Stitch Jones, and they're having this moment where they're talking, and I don't know, even though obviously clearly they're talking to each other, but I'm wondering if the dialogue is somehow talking to us as the viewer about a sort of a more middle approach, because we've talked about all of the characters represent these tropes, but the extreme versions of them, that maybe there's some middle ground that the movie's wanting us to interrogate. And then the final one is Gunny Highway and his ex-wife walking by themselves away from the parade down the flight line, and then you just go credits. And so I guess to your question is, what is the movie getting at? I think the movie is definitely trying to continue to beat the drum and wave the flag, but at the same time, I think there is an aspect of that there's a terminal limit to this sort of ultra macho oorah oorah gung ho-ness. That it does have it has a shelf life. And so what are you going to do with it? Are you going to walk off by yourself, or are you going to walk off with someone that you're going to find that thing that is significance and walk off with that? But whatever way you cut it, you're going to be walking you're going to be walking alone or walking down the flight line away from the parade, and no one is going to notice that you're doing it. And you're just going to go away. Credits.
It's a good point.
Yeah.
It's a good point. Some of that, I think, is it's like passing the cake at the birthday. You know, the oldest Marine to the youngest Marine. That's, Highway and Jones. I think there's two other pieces to it, though. There's Marine Corps, most ready when the nation's least ready. Improvise, adapt, overcome. What that really means is no matter what else is going on, personally, professionally, whatever, when the call comes, Marines are going. Ready or not.
Here we come.
Ready or not, here we come. Best and hardest, most experienced, or, just can't even speak English yet. We're going. And that can be counted on. So I think that's the argument is the Marine Corps is that sort of culture that's going to go ready or not. I think the other argument is maybe it's a little darker in some ways, but it goes hand in hand with that. Is regardless of what else is going on, alcohol abuse, post-traumatic stress, broken relationships, all those things, for some Marines, all of that is worth it to be a Marine. Mm-hmm. And you'll sacrifice all of those things. Yeah. And again, that's not a balanced approach to living. And again, neither is the Marine Corps really when you come right down to it at the pointy end. Which is, again, what this is supposed to be depicting. It's supposed to be, a deploying unit. That's everything else is secondary.
Yeah, like the colonel says, what is it? They seize the opportunity, they kicked ass or whatever when he's firing.
Exactly. When the major is, were you good at that? Yeah. Well, then why didn't you keep doing it? So,
yeah. I'll throw in the ring, though. I do think this film was made for a general broad audience. I don't think it was made specifically for Marines, even though Marines were definitely a target audience. I think it was made for, young males as a whole. So I would argue that the point the film is trying to make is that, A, America's back, B, that we are going to be involved in history is not ending. Vietnam War is not the end of history for America, and that we will be forced to face future challenges, and that current generations of America should look to the past into figures such as Gunner's Treasure Highway as a guide for how we can go in the future, but while also still being forward thinking to the challenges that we're going to hit. But all in all, I like this film now more that we've talked about it. I don't think it's maybe gone from a 2.5 to 3 to maybe a 2.75.
Oh, nice.
So, yeah, slowly,
and if you go to a 10-point scale, that puts it over 5.
yeah, exactly.
So.
But we're not. But you know, as a whole, it is an endearing film, and it is definitely an instrumental part of Marine Corps culture. I didn't even know about the whole overcome and adapt. That it came from who would have thought?
Yeah. You figured that's
Improvise,
out of
adapt,
or
overcome.
something. Yeah.
So, anyways, y'all, thanks for listening.
So I think
one
there's
more.
one saved round. I think we got to revisit this. Small point. So when I was a company commander in 1st Battalion, 1st Marines, 1998 timeframe, Battalion Sergeant Major was a career Force Recon Marine named Jim Deaver. In the movie,
Rappel Tower guy.
he is the Rappel Tower Staff NCOIC, putting Clint and Mario Van Peebles down the Rappel Tower. And after he retired, Sergeant Major Deaver works today in Hollywood as a technical advisor on a lot of war movies.
Yeah.
And he's also a great student of war movies, and would be a good guest to get on the show.
We'll
So maybe this is just part 1.
This is right. Yeah, this is our entryway.
But you better get ready for the F-bombs.
That's just part of the
Yeah,
job.
that's right. That chamber's already it's already seated.
All right, well, good to go. Thanks
Yeah,
for
thank you so
listening,
much,
y'all.
sir, for coming in and doing
Awesome.
this.
Thanks.
Scuttlebutt is a production of the Marine Corps Association. You have heard the voices or contributions from Major Vic Rubel, USMC retired, Nancy Litchman, William Truding, and our guest. Ty Frazier is the editor, sound engineer, and technical producer. The Marine Corps Association is not an agency of the U.S. government. The opinions expressed in this episode are the personal views of the participants and do not reflect the official position of the United States Marine Corps, the Department of Defense, or the Marine Corps Association.